Hello all. So basically, I decided to make a video to discuss what would have been what would happen in the presentation for the literacy comes in all shapes and sizes, the Know Your Rights segment. So my name is Martin Castro. I am a history teacher at International Community High School. And so let me just give you a little rundown of what some of the resources that you're being given and basically like why I believe that this is like a type of literacy. So first off, you would have been exposed to is we would have played a Know Your Rights game through Kahoot, and it's just a way to, and it's basically the groundwork for a lot of the information I give students regarding knowing the rights. It's just a quick way to enter this topic of students. You know, they like to play Kahoot as well. Um, and, um, and it also gives you a sense of like how much the students actually know when going into this topic. And, uh, it's also a way to kind of gauge their interest. Um, there's also opportunities to have like a lot of follow-up questions during the Kahoot. So don't think of it as like a way to just play the Kahoot and to see who wins. Think of it more as for an opportunity for students to really learn about different rights, but at the same time asking a lot of questions. Um, so I think that's like kind of like the best way to approach this. And you know, there have been classes where even though the Kahoot really it has just 8 questions, for some classes it takes the whole time because you're basically playing the game. You go through the one question, you have like the follow-up slide that gives you more information about that right or that rule, and students start asking a lot of questions. So I would say think of it more as if you're doing this as a lesson, think of it as a foundation for a lesson that you can then build upon. You're also doing a collaborative board about how you would react it to this Kahoot. Um, and really, I would have had you like talk about topics such as knowing rights, and if you believe that these types of topics are um, should be considered essential as other literacy topics. And when I think of other literacy topics, I'm thinking of writing, reading, etc. Um, now, I think that having students know about their rights, it's in this country, it is really very much like other rights or other types of literacies that we consider as like something that's more and more common, but also more and more necessary for our students. What comes to mind is financial literacy. I think a lot of people feel like, yeah, students should have like some awareness, some idea of like what financial literacy is and what that means in their lives. And personally, like I have ideas about what literacies are also important. What comes to my mind, especially because of the work I do at International Community, is I believe like students have to have a certain proficiency, a certain level of literacy when it comes to like post-secondary readiness, for example, and just having students know like things about careers, things about what it means, like what exactly will their lives will be like if they go to college, what if they go into career, like how do they make these decisions? All of those things are, I think, it's a literacy type that's important for students to engage with while they're, especially for our population, for it to engage with in our schools. And it's something that I feel we need to provide. And I think it's also important for when it comes to literacy around knowing the rights, I think it's also especially important because, I think we as teachers in their high schools, like we should be the ones who have like the most knowledge, the most understanding of, this of a lot of the things that they're exposed to in American society. And this idea of like having them know their rights and practice their rights and really understand like it doesn't matter if they are freshly arrived to this country, doesn't matter if they're documented or undocumented, like they they have rights in this country, and that, that shouldn't keep them from really being a member of this community in the city or their own neighborhoods or just in the country. So I know that sometimes maybe we think like it's they're still they they're really much just very like learning the language and everything. And some of them like you maybe worry that if they're in ninth grade, like how are we going to really have them engage in this? But I think it's just one of those things where we can't wait for them to kind of like be ready in certain other aspects, like in terms of, for example, language, because like this is something that they can readily use or maybe even really forced to use. Um, I, so I'm thinking back to when teachers like this time last year, some teachers were already using a lot of tech. They had some some level of tech literacy. Other teachers did not have a lot of like tech literacy. Maybe they were quote unquote more old school. But like we were confronted with this pandemic with remote learning, and regardless of how comfortable you felt, you had to develop these literacy skills quickly. And this is just like a very different example, but just this idea of like, look, we were confronted with having to really develop these skills like almost overnight, and we've all had to make adjustments and learn new ideas and new ways to do things. But I think that's but some of our students, like, they have no idea what their rights are, and we want them to learn and understand in the classroom, not in a situation when they're outside the classroom, when they're confronted, um, by police or by ICE agents, anything like that. That's not the time for them to really have to be confronted with, their lack of knowledge. The classroom is a safe space, and it's the place where they can really refine those ideas and those skills. So how do I approach this topic? So I teach 9th to 10th grade, and really I start the lessons pretty early on in the school year. Let's say the school year starts early September. I'm basically having these Know Your Rights lessons at the beginning of October, thereabouts. And it's, as a history teacher, like we do like these introductory lessons each year where we talk about, oh, what is history? How do historians think? Those kind of like bigger historical idea topics before we get to like the meat and potatoes of the content. And so right after I do that, I talk about knowing their rights. And so that's basically like these are ninth graders a lot of times, and so it's like right away it's like, all right, let's talk about your rights, let's talk about how you interact with police, let's talk about what happens if ICE knocks on your door, that kind of thing. Um and so maybe some people think this is really early because there's a lot of new things that students are getting accustomed to. Maybe this kind of these possible confrontations might frighten or intimidate the students. But I've always felt like it's been something overall that's been positive with students. Like I mentioned before, I start off with the Kahoot. I think it's fun that students are into it, and basically they are themselves interested to see if they know the answers to the questions, even if they are kind of like brand new to this country. They're interested to see if they still know the rights. Maybe they've seen a lot of TV, a lot of movies. Maybe they want to compare and contrast like what our rights here are compared to theirs back home. So I think starting it off fresh with like a Kahoot is a pretty good way to start. And it never hurts to have like some candy or something as prizes, that kind of thing. Obviously in remote setting you can't do that, but we have to look ahead to like when we are back into the classroom. So I think some of the rights that we discuss, there's a lot of opportunities for discussions connected to certain questions of the Kahoot that really allows students to ask questions. Like, for example, I think one section where you can really sort of make a connection and really connect it to like the bigger landscape of what students are seeing on the news and all. Um, like there's one question in the Kahoot that asks like, what's the, how should you react if you are being arrested, but you know that you are innocent? Like, what's the correct way to respond to that? And so like, do you respond by, you know, being upset at the police officer? Do you resist the arrest because, hey, you're innocent? Why should you stand for that? Try to remain calm. And, I think there's a lot of examples, out there where people were complying, people were doing all the right things, and they were still, um, they were still met with violence. They were killed by the police. Um, and so maybe, and I always struggle with giving like kind of this advice because I know that overall, like that's the advice you should be giving, to try to present yourself like to not give the police sort of like quote unquote any reason for them to for them to uh, react with violence or or force. um, but I think this opens up the avenues for like conversations with students. And if you're thinking, for example, um, like where do these lessons, do they just stand alone or can they be incorporated into peer discussions? I think many of us are trying to create lessons and discussions around like discussing like the Black Lives Matter movements, um, and I think that really connects to like having conversations about our rights. So it just follows. I think there's a lot of places um, where you can introduce like these topics so that students really understand them, and then really make it seem like these are real things that you're teaching them, that it's not just something that's abstract, but rather it's something that they can carry into their lives right away, and something that's really going to help them stay safe and protected. um, yeah. And I think there's that question. There's also like there's questions about what you should do if you're undocumented, like what kind of rights do police have. And I think that also really ties into like a lot of different discussions you can have about like the history of immigration in this country. Like what is the ever-changing role and perspective towards immigrants in the United States. And I think that those are also entry points into introducing students to their rights. There's also if when in the resources it explains like how like different ways to sort of test the knowledge of students after you have discussions about the topic and present them with like different rights. So there are, for example, some scenarios that are included that students can respond to and write about. So you can read this in the materials. Um, and there's also a website that I've created that's, it's not that big, but it's pretty, it's a pretty, it's a place where the students can read more information about like knowing their rights. It has a lot of interesting videos there. And I was able to find like some resources in different languages as well. And very importantly, there's also a description of what a real warrant signed by a judge is in this website. So and I think that's something that's very important for us students to kind of like have as a reference, especially like, if they're, if, for example, like police officers or ICE do knock on their doors. And while I was doing this lesson with students, like I did have them do a mini project, and so they were asked to create like a presentation that highlighted the main points of this topic. Like things like how do you interact with police, or what to do when ICE knocks on your door, or what are some of your rights, or what are some helpful resources. And and so basically I have them create this little mini project, and then what they do is they're tasked with taking it home and presenting it to, like, for example, their parents or their aunts, or people that they live with, or people in their community, like friends, people who may not know that these rights. I remember it's like a lot of these rights are, as you're presenting them to students, they are things that are very new to them. They're never really they haven't really they didn't know that these rights existed, like especially if students are undocumented. I feel like they always feel like they don't have any rights, and so it forces them to um, to avoid different parts of our society, because they're afraid that they don't have any rights. So I think having them learn about these is kind of eye-opening for them, and it's also an opportunity for them to really present and pass these ideas on to other people who maybe are unaware of their rights. And it's really something that it's a good extension, or a really good first step of, like, what it means to make, like, to showcase relevant ideas and have relevant projects in your classes. And I think it's something that you can also expand upon. For example, I did have like an immigration club at the school last year. And students were actually learning about this, and they were then going into other classrooms to do to basically do a presentation and talk about their rights. And of course, like, a lot of that got shut down as the pandemic started, but it's something that I'm hoping I could start back up once we get back. And just thinking about the impact of discussing this topic, I'm reminded of something that alumni told me, when we were discussing, like, some of the things that we're doing at the school. He said that students will talk about a subject or topic if the teacher is discussing it. And like basically saying that if the student sees that the teacher is talking about something, then the student will be more likely to also engage in that conversation. Like, even if the student was already thinking about it and thought it was important for them, maybe they will not be the ones to bring it up, because for multitude of reasons. But once they see that the teacher is discussing it, then they feel that it is okay to have an open discussion in class about it. So that's something that's really stuck with me, and I feel it's something that something that I've tried to keep in mind when building when deciding what I want to talk about in my class. And so this is also like something I think about, and how, and especially when it comes to, like, when I started discussing this project, or when I start talking about the rights, or anything that I feel is just something that's really, I think is new, or something that might be very helpful for students. I think about what this alumni said. And I think some of the, aside from it just being something important to talk to students about, some of the impacts of discussing this topic have been, like, students, they have, like, kind of sort of after class or in a follow-up email, have asked me, follow-up questions, like one-to-one. And I think this is important, just because students try to start seeing you as someone they can trust about these topics. And I think it's important that students feel that at school, especially around these kinds of things, having someone that they can talk about sort of worries outside of the class. Like, so a lot of students, they're trying to get their immigration statuses changed, trying to they're going to court for these, or maybe they don't know if they can do that. I think having these conversations, as a teacher, starting these conversations, is a way to give them the green light to say, hey, you can talk to me about these things. I may not be an expert, but I'm willing to start the conversation. And, and as long as you, as a teacher, know who you can then refer them to at the school who is, more experienced, or if you have like a community-based organization that works with the school, that you can then refer the student to and say like, hey, here's a student who has these questions. And if you tell a student that you trust those people at the organization, I think that facilitates things a lot. And a lot of times when you're having, as like I said, I start these with ninth graders. When I have these conversations with them, it kind of keys me in a little bit depending on their questions and on the reactions. I have some sense of which students, for example, might need specific services. What I mean by that is like, I basically kind of get to see which students might be undocumented. And, and I think the further you engage in these discussions, the, students are more likely um, to state that they're undocumented or to talk to you in private about their status. And then you know that you can provide more supports for them. If it's and maybe it's possible, throughout their high school career, for them to change, maybe to go and try to change their status, and that could be something that like that first step in that process is them talking to you about it, early on in their high school career, and then they'll have a better chance to get it all like done and processed by the time they graduate. It is, of course, it is a process that takes years. So the sooner you start those first steps, the more likely it is for the student to have it go through. And with your school as a support, it makes it even better for the student. I also think talking about your rights in their role, like it shows that the students that you care about them enough to really have these discussions, and you're in these discussions you're creating a safe space for students because you're basically showing them these ideas and these and having these discussions to have to really keep them safe. And I think they understand that that's why you're doing it, and it helps them to understand that your classroom is a safe space. And then you can build upon that later with lessons that that where students you're asking them to maybe be vulnerable in discussions that might be difficult, but you've already created that idea of a safe space, so they're more willing to engage in them. And it is engaging. Like students like to learn about these things, they find it interesting, and I just know that they find it interesting. And because of all the follow-up questions that happen, sometimes you're teaching and you're giving them information and you think, I think this is interesting, but the students think it's interesting, and it's like crickets. No one's answering questions, no one's asking additional ones, so you just think, okay, I don't think they really like this topic. But they do like to ask a lot of follow-up questions when you talk about rights. So and of course you're not the expert. We're not lawyers, we're teachers. And but I think it's we can answer some of the questions, and for the rest we can as teachers we can I think we're capable of doing more research, or to refer students to something more reliable. Um, and one thing I'll say here in this video is that really have like I like to push students to follow on like organizations like Unlocal on Instagram. Unlocal really does a good job of just posting information, having workshops. They have regular open legal clinics. So having students be aware of all that, and telling them that it's an organization that you trust and that have a good track record. It's just telling the student, hey, this is something that if your family needs it, you can go do it. I think that's also something that where they it's something important to them, something that's helpful, but they also start to see the school as a hub for for the community. You know, I think we take it for granted that, you know, that's an ongoing thing. You know, that it's not automatically, hey, the school's here, so it's part of the community. Like, no, we need to put in like a regular effort to make it like a living part of the community. Um, and well, I think that discussing rights with students, it is culturally relevant. I think it's something that is important for young people to know about. You know, I think the the landscape of interactions between, you know, our young people of color and law enforcement, it really it's something that we need to prepare students for, and to give them all the tools possible in order to keep them safe.
This is a reminder.
So,
Tashka for medicine at 10 p.m.
so yeah, so thank you for listening. I hope that this video kind of helps you understand why, like, having students exposed to knowing their rights is something that is, I feel it's considered like it is a type of literacy. And I hope that, you know, as a follow-up, you know, there are a lot of resources or lesson items that I provide for you. And just consider like how you can incorporate or implement some of these ideas within your own curriculum or as a standalone unit, you know, but I appreciate the time you've taken in learning more about it. Thank you.